All right, welcome back to the Torch of Liberty. Glad you guys are here.
Welcome, guys. We are excited that you guys are here. We have a lot to go through today. Talk about the difference between common and commercial law. We're also going to dive into the Constitution and the Bill of Rights today. So get your ears and your brains rolling because we got lots to share today.
Heck yeah. Yeah, so in preparation for this podcast or this episode, I went about getting me and Quad A some pocket constitutions from the Cato Institute. I would recommend that to any person living in the United States. They're relatively cheap, not a high dollar purchase. And I spent some time reading that. And like we said on our intro video and stuff, we're not just going to be going through and teaching you all this stuff. We're going to bring it back to how it applies in all of our lives. So just get ready for this episode.
Definitely. One thing I want to get into before I delve into common versus commercial law is this little constitution right here that we got. Because a lot of you guys think that we have constitutional rights, which we don't. And you're like, Quad A, how do we not have constitutional rights? There's the Constitution right in your hands. This document right here is a contract that our government that we put in place has to follow and abide by. The Constitution is to protect your human rights. So you have human rights, you don't have constitutional rights. So let's get into the difference between commercial and common law or natural law. Natural law and common law, they're the same thing. But the difference between the two is really simple. So when the founding fathers founded this country, they went by common law rather than commercial law, which we're going through today, which is the United States Code that has 50,000 plus statutes in it.
And with what he's talking about with those is like jaywalking, speeding, fishing without a fishing license. I think like I was going out to get one this year. You have to have a pole have to have a license to have two poles at once, and it costs you a little bit more, but that way you can put two poles in the water. So that's the type of law, which are like codes and statutes that get pressed on us, whereas this isn't what was going through the founding fathers when they were discussing law and writing these documents in order to protect our human rights.
On point. And with common law, it's really, really simple. So you do no harm. You don't harm another human being. You don't do heinous crimes against your fellow neighbor. You don't damage anybody's property. You drive a car through somebody's house and yeah, that's a crime. You don't do that. Human rights violations. So like getting down to the basics of like natural law, follow the 10 Commandments. You know what I'm saying? That's the original law of the land. You know what I'm saying? So it's really, really simple. You don't harm another human being. You don't damage property. Don't commit any human rights violations. That simple.
And that's another thing with American law. The founding documents of this country not only was the Bible, but is the Declaration of Independence, the Constitution, and then there was the Ordinance of 1787, I believe, the Northwest Ordinance, and then the Articles of Confederation. And all these things, that's where we get a lot of stuff that is like no cruel and unusual punishment, and all these other things tie into all that, though.
So to give you a few examples of how our government has encroached on our human rights is the right to travel. So technically you don't need a driver's license. And this is where we come between commercial and natural law when it comes to driving or traveling. See, those are two different terms. So commercially, you're driving like a commercial vehicle because everything is about money to them. So when you're driving a motor vehicle, you're in commercial law. But if you're traveling in your automobile, you're traveling, you're using your human right to travel freely. So when you get pulled over, you're going 100 miles an hour down the interstate. In common law, if you haven't hurt anybody, you haven't damaged any property, you haven't committed any human rights violations, you have committed no crime whatsoever. But in commercial, in their jurisdiction, it's all what if. So if you're driving 100 miles an hour down the interstate, oh, what if you hit somebody? Oh, what if you crashed into a bridge or
a deer jumps out in the road? Like
anything. What if, you know?
And with that, it's like if you're on a truck freighting gasoline or something, and then those companies are like, you could have wasted all that product. So, and then there's all these rules like that. Like he was saying, I wish I had all the documents. We're not going to go about it now to find it. We'll maybe bring it up in our next video or one of these next videos. There are Supreme Court cases where it's like back to the days of tractors just coming out and motors and motor vehicles just originating on the U.S. front, where there was farmers who would harvest crops, drive into big cities and sell their crops. And it got to Supreme Court cases, which we have. I carry some in my car that we'll show you on one of the next videos or whatnot, where the judgment by the Supreme Court was that, okay, as farmers come in and sell their product, like they debated the limits on how you operate in a society and selling your goods. But as it applies to us now, like if you're not, you know, like you do need a CDL, you do need to be licensed, driver's license to haul freight and stuff like that, or like being a taxi driver or Uber, you're in commerce on the roadways, so you have to be licensed and you have to follow their rules and statutes and stuff and codes. And I believe I've heard that it was written best in Washington's codes that the RCW, that there is a right to travel. And we'll get into that when we open up the Constitution, that like literally the First Amendment, right to free speech, right to religion. You'll see it here, right to press and freely assemble. So like literally the founders, as they were drafting the Bill of Rights, thought about, you have the right to speak what you want, you have the right to worship what God you want, you have the right to be where you want. And I think it says in there peacefully. So like you can't just go on a rampage and be violent and have the right to go wherever and say whatever. But if you, like I think it literally says to freely assemble peacefully or whatnot, and we'll get into that. But so it's all stuff they've thought about, but there are Supreme Court cases with this that do determine that humans have the right to travel. And that gets into paying registration fees for your vehicles, throwing a little colored tab on your car every year. I think for my Corolla, it was like, I just did it. It was like $120 or whatever here in Washington. And that's every year. But I'm not an Uber driver. I don't drive my vehicle in commerce. So it's stuff like that, as well as like fishing license, where I get that more, where it's like you want to regulate how much fish you have in your environment. So I get that aspect of tracking, like the hunting and game. But there's so much more that goes into that.
Right. I want to touch on that too, because when it comes to hunting and fishing and things like that, yeah, it's obviously you don't want to overfish, you don't want to overhunt, but it's not a crime, if you get what I'm saying. In common law, if you haven't harmed anybody or damaged any property, you can fish as much as you want to. But obviously, you got to keep in mind that there's not that many fish in the lake and you can't overfish. That makes sense. Yeah. But fines and jail time, that is unconstitutional. That's against your human rights. Also, when we're explaining when you need your CDL for freight and you need your driver's license to be a taxi driver or Uber driver, as long as you're not on the road making money, they have no jurisdiction over you.
Yeah.
They are literally just raking in cash for themselves. Our government is sending the policy enforcement agents to come pull you over. and say, oh, let me see your driver's license and your registration and proof of your insurance. And they're going by commercial law. What people don't know is that you haven't actually committed a actual crime. See, here's where the difference is at. There's legal and then there's lawful. And that's literally commercial versus common law. Legal is commercial. Lawful is common. I'll give you an example. It used to be legal to own slaves in the United States, but is it lawful to own slaves in the United States? Think about that.
And part of what we were doing on this episode too, I mean, there's a whole lot more to say about common versus commercial. And I mean, at first, with what we've said so far, it's just kind of to provoke a thought of, okay, as I operate, me, him, you, in your daily life, going to work, going to school, having children, watching them grow up, it's an important factor not to ignore your freedom and everyone's freedom. There's countless examples of just in the past 10, 20 years, even if there's small things that you wouldn't cause a riot for or protest, they're still affecting your daily life. Like, one example off the top of my head is airports. I mean, I was born in 1999, my bad, but in 2001, airport security changed a lot. And there's a great deal of things you can say about that. You're flying on companies who have invested hundreds of millions in making commercial airliners, so you're going into a company to fly you like other places. But other than that, like if you look back to how I was talking about farmers with tractors needing to have license, and to the point now where I'm going into the DOL or the DMV or whatever and paying for little tabs, that's stuff that does really affect my life a lot. I mean, it's not like a vast sum of money for me. Like, I think it was like $120 or whatever, 119. But I'm just one person in a city of near 500,000. And that's one city in a state where in Seattle there's what?
A couple million?
Yeah. So $120 multiplied by 2 million, and that's just Washington. And I don't see the results of what that money does. I just see it out of my pocket. But it's just that type of thought that we're wanting to provoke with this talk. It's very important to have common law and a civilized society where it's not just mayhem all the time, where you're watching your back if you're walking outside any day of the week at night. And it's just stuff like that you got to start considering, like, hey, we hear so much talk, whether people really like this nation or really don't for whatever reasons, taking a step back past the banter and looking into how is it that all these people can move money around, make laws that one man has to follow, 2 men, a whole nation of people have to follow. Because there's a lot more that we have to speak on. And I mean, we'll come with different episodes about that specifically, about what we can do about that. And it's not like just throwing your hands up saying I'm not paying taxes, because that don't work.
Yeah, and everybody and their mama know that the government has been stealing from us for how long, since they've been taxing. Just, you've probably heard of this before, the Boston Tea Party, how the British were taxing a certain amount for all the tea that was coming in and being shipped out. But now we got taxes on our income. We got taxes on when we purchase items. We got tabs that we have to put on our cars, licenses. The list goes on and on. So everybody knows that we be getting robbed with these taxes. And like Rick was saying, that just one small thing the $120 for the tabs. Just think about all the money that they're raking in with the licensings, all the money they're raking in on your income taxes, tickets,
parking tickets.
Could be upwards to trillions of dollars, right?
Oh yeah, untold amounts, more than I'm sure a lot of people make yearly, just by, like, I'm talking like parking ticket, meter maids type things, and just all that goes into it. And that's what the second part of this video is going to get into, about, I think we have the documents here, so we can pull them up actually right now. So we got two things to show you guys. This first one's real easy. It's just the Bill of Rights. And we debated whether we were going to go through and read all of them for you guys. We figured there's no point in not doing so, because I actually, as I was prepping for this, realized something quite interesting. And I'll make note of that before, just so you guys know beforehand, before I go through and read all these, that just take notice to the first sentence of each one. And I'd argue that each first sentence, some of them are just one sentence, some of them are more than one sentence. In the first sentence, they're pretty self-explanatory, and if you went to anyone who speaks English, you'd be able to conclude that there is a progression of displaying a right of humans that shall be protected, or something that's prohibited from the government to do to people to preserve those rights. So just take note of just the first sentence, because all the ones I'm going to read up until one very important one, which I'm not sure how many people know about. I'm glad you're here and watching this video, because wait until I get to this one. It's the 14th. I'll just say it now. But just take note of the first sentence of each. So, Amendment number 1. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech or of the press, or the right of the people peaceably to assemble and to petition the government for a redress of grievances. Number 2. A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed.
And let me add something to that real quick. Does it say anywhere in here, the right to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed? But you need a permit, but you need a background check, but you need all these other things.
But you can't have X amount of rounds in your clip.
Can't have a magazine of certain capacity. That's all infringement.
Can't have a certain type of weapon.
I'm just saying.
And it does say shall not be infringed.
Period. Shall not be infringed.
And I mean, that gets into law speak of what they meant when they wrote that and how it's interpreted now through the judicial system and everything.
It's really simple.
But that's
shall not be infringed.
And that's a small side note.
Right.
But I mean, as we're addressing them now, might as well make that known, because that does go back to common and commercial law, where the licensing to drive a car, registration to pay on the tabs for your vehicle, like a special color on your car, and if it's after this time in this year and it's that color, then you owe the state. That's the same thing with licensing your gun. At least here, we have to pay a decent amount to get a right to conceal carry. Anyways, number 3, no soldier shall, in time of peace, be quartered in any house without the consent of the owner, nor in time of war, but in a manner to be prescribed by law. Where you wanted to?
Yeah, so yeah. Look.
Flag law?
Yeah. I just want to point this out because a lot of people don't know this either.
Yeah.
When it comes to this amendment. Because it says that soldiers shall not be quartered in any house without the consent of the owner, nor in time of war, but in the manner to be prescribed by law. So when it says, but in a manner to be prescribed by law, this is where flag law comes in, because a lot of the American flags out there, we're all patriotic in this country. We all have this same flag, the red, white, and blue with the 50 stars. A lot of people don't know that's actually a flag of war. So in wartime, when we got things happening on our soil, right? If the soldiers see an American flag, the red, white, and blue with 50 stars, they can quarter in there in the manner of prescribed by law. That's flag law. We have the war flag, which is the red, white, and blue, the 50 stars. But there's also a peace flag, and we'll get into that later.
Oh, yeah. There's a lot of this stuff that we might bring up. Anything we bring up in any of these videos is something that we will most likely be covering in a following video if we haven't talked about it before. Because if we had talked about it before, we'll refer back to whatever video it was or whatnot. So just know that we'll get to it in a other video or whatnot, and talk more about it. And that's one I was about to just tell him before he said all that, just like, oh, wait, I'm flagged off. But honestly, it's a perfect time to speak on it because, like, this is the first episode. We're getting into the nitty gritty of it all. Number 4. The right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures shall not be violated, and no warrants shall issue but upon probable cause, supported by oath or affirmation, and particularly describing the place to be searched and the persons or things to be seized.
In common law, when you get pulled over, you haven't committed any violations at all. They call them in commercial law traffic violations or moving violations. And then they'll make up whatever they want to search your vehicle without what? A warrant. Anyway, I digress.
And that's another thing we'll get into. And some of these things that we bring up is stuff that we've heard about and know about and haven't had firsthand interaction with in the real world. But it's all stuff, like everything we speak on now is stuff we are going to be vested in and studying at other times to present for another video. All right. Number 5. No person shall be held to answer for a capital or otherwise infamous crime unless on a presentment or indictment of a grand jury, except in cases arising in the land or naval forces or in the militia, when in actual service in time of war or public danger. Nor shall any person be subject for the same offense to be twice put in jeopardy of life or limb, nor shall be compelled in any criminal case to be witness against himself, nor be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of law, nor shall private property be taken for public use without just compensation. And that's probably one of the ones, like I'm sure you've heard, I plead the 5th. I have the right to not speak. That is essentially what this is. And that's one that you've probably heard of before. At least should have heard before. All right, number 6. In all criminal prosecution, the accused shall enjoy the right to a speedy and public trial by an impartial jury of the state and district wherein the crime shall have been committed, which district shall have been previously ascertained by law, and to be informed of the nature and cause of the accusation, to be confronted with the witnesses against himself or him, to have compulsory process for obtaining witnesses in his favor, and to have the assistance of counsel for his defense. That's another one. You have the right to a speedy trial. That's one that most of you probably have heard. That's basically where it comes from. And then this also gets into jury trial and trial by jury. As we get into the judicial side of things, that's one where that'll return on the front stage, because there's a whole pathway that will go down with videos talking about the judicial system itself.
And going to jail for 30 days for contempt, that's not a speedy trial just because the judge gets mad that you know your human rights versus their legal crap. I guess you could put it that way.
Number 7. In suits at common law, where the value in controversy shall exceed $20, the right of trial by a jury shall be preserved, and no fact tried by a jury shall be otherwise re-examined in any court of the United States than according to the rules of the common law.
What does that say?
Common law.
Huh? Did somebody say common law?
I didn't.
In the Constitution? So yeah, does it say rules of the commercial law? Does it say rules of the statutes and codes of the United States? And no.
Then you guys can see up there, number 8, excessive bail shall not be required, nor excessive fines imposed, nor cruel and unusual punishment inflicted. That's another one where everyone talks about torturing and stuff in prisons, and that's like essentially war crimes, but that's for another topic or another day. All right. Number 9. The enumeration in the Constitution of certain rights shall not be construed to deny or disparage others retained by the people. This one and number 10. The powers not delegated to the United States by the Constitution, nor prohibited by it to the states, are reserved to the states respectively or to the people. Those both are basically layering over to taper the size of government and say, hey, if the powers, because like we're skipping over the articles in the Constitution setting up like what the legislature and judiciary and executive do, we're getting right down to the human rights aspect of it, not the setup of the government itself, which we very may well get back into that in another episode. But for now, we're diving right into the human rights, because all you listening probably aren't court, like freaking judges and attorneys and people who work, like the president of the U.S. probably ain't listening to this one right now. So we're getting right into the heart of the matter with the Bill of Rights. Because like I was saying before, notice, and that's the Bill of Rights right there, the first 10. Notice how all of those in the first sentence displays a right to be protected or emphasized or whatnot, that they intended to state the human right. And this is where what he was saying earlier, it's not a constitutional right, it's a human right protected by the Constitution. And notice how all of those directly tie into the individual, and as to protect their rights, like all of these.
The rights of the people.
So, I mean, you can go back and read the first sentence of all those or rewatch the video, but the first sentence in all of those directly assessed a right in the first sentence. It's a very well written document. It's survived till now, made this country great. And the part I was wanting to get to is number 14, so we shall press forward. And also, at least, I guess it says it up there too, but in our little booklet, it tells us the day in which it was ratified, all these other amendments. So number 11, February 7th, 1795. And some of these do get back into how the government operates, like the system of which it is, not just directly personal rights. But then you'll see by the 13th and the 14th, it goes right back into human rights. So number 11, the judicial power of the United States shall not be construed to extend to any suit in law or equity commenced or prosecuted against one of the United States by citizens of another state or by citizens or subjects of any foreign state. And then we got 12. This one's a long one. I'm debating even reading it all. It's just talking about like voting for president and vice president. I mean, we might as well read it just since we're here at this point. You can fast forward a few seconds if you don't want to hear it, I guess. The electors shall meet in their respective states and vote by ballot for president and vice president, one of whom at least shall not be an inhabitant of the same state with themselves. They shall name in their ballots the person voted for as president, and in district ballots the person
Distinct ballots.
Distinct, my bad. Yeah, it's a little dark in here. In distinct ballots the person voted for as vice president, and they shall make distinct lists of all persons voted for as president, and of all persons voted for as vice president, and of the number of votes for each, which lists they shall sign and certify, and transmit sealed to the seat of the government of the United States, directed to the President of the Senate. The President of the Senate shall, in the presence of the Senate and House of Representatives, open all the certificates, and the votes shall be then counted. The person having the greatest number of votes for president shall be the president. If such number be a majority of the whole number of electors appointed, and if no person has such majority, then from the persons having the highest numbers not exceeding 3 on the list of those who voted for as president, the House of Representatives shall choose immediately by ballot the president. But in choosing the president, the vote shall be taken by states, the representation from each state having one vote. A quorum for this purpose shall consist of a member or members from 2/3 of the states, and a majority of all the states shall be necessary to a choice. And if the House of Representatives shall not choose a president whenever the right of choice shall devolve upon them before the 4th day of March next following, then the vice president shall act as president, as in the case of the death or other constitutional disability of the president. The person having the greatest number of votes as vice president shall be the vice president, if such number be a majority of the whole number of electors appointed, and if no person have a majority, then from the 2 highest numbers on the list the Senate shall choose the vice president. A quorum for the purpose shall consist of 2/3 of the whole number of senators, and a majority of the whole number shall be necessary to a choice. But no person constitutionally ineligible to the office of president shall be eligible to that of vice president of the United States. Phew. Okay.
Hey, that's a long one.
Yeah. I mean, I'm glad they wrote all this and got it set up so we're not under kingship and tyranny and all that. But that's not one of the ones we're trying to get across to you watching right now. This is where it gets interesting. The 13th Amendment abolishing slavery. So section 1, neither slavery nor involuntary servitude, except as a punishment for a crime whereof the party shall have been duly convicted, shall exist within the United States, or any place subject to their jurisdiction. And section 2, it reappears in a lot of different amendments, just says that Congress shall have power to enforce this article by appropriate legislation. So that's when slavery was abolished. And then you got to imagine the time frame. So on the 13th Amendment was ratified December 6, 1865. So you got to imagine the landscape, like take a bird's eye view and like try to actually feel it personally if you were living in that time. What was going through the heads of all the people to start with? Like you got to imagine that the entire country is just post-Civil War, a lot of strife and conflict had just gone down. Many men have died over this. But there's also the hope for the newly freed slaves, for progress into the future in the greatest country on earth. So you got a real high mix of feelings between good and bad, loss and gain. And then you got to start thinking about those people who have just lost their involuntary servitude, who had been stacking up money and resources easily by involuntary servitude that was now newly taken from them, where they've had multiple generations at sometimes, I'm sure, of plantation owners, and now it's gone. I mean, I know they talk about Juneteenth and whatnot, like the last people to hear about it wasn't for a while, but I just mean in a general mindset of the people who now don't have involuntary servitude to run their farms. You got to imagine, especially bankers and people pulling the strings, it's a vastly different landscape from the years of time where they had slavery to now they're thinking, oh, is everyone now free? And should that be the way things go? You got to imagine, especially looking at today's state of the state of today, where we're paying $120 here for my car tabs and fishing license every year. And I mean, it's not like there's just one person sitting there at the DMV, the clerk, saying, yeah, I think this is just and right. No, they're, what was the term? It was compartmentalized legal idiot. That's one we'll get into more later. But so it's not just like the clerks and even the management at the local DMV here in our city. But like from the top down, and not only now, but way back then. Like for like no one who was pulling strings and alive back then is alive today and pulling strings now, or at least I'd hope. But so you just got to think about that. Like, are they just gonna let their involuntary servitude go silently into the night and be okay paying people more and maybe going out and picking their own crops? I don't think so. I'm sure there were some.
Let's make it really simple. The ones in power lost their slaves. And they're like, if we can't have slaves, how do we get them? They made everybody slaves. And we'll also get into that.
And that's exactly where we're at. Because like I said before, number 14, and here we are. And remember how I said the first sentence in all the other amendments identified a human right and sought to protect it from the government or establish it as a key point. Like no search and seizure, cruel punishment, no unusual and cruel punishment. Right to bear arms shall not be infringed. Freedom of press, speech, religion, assembly, peaceably assemble. All these things, most of which in the first sentence, some of these amendments were just one sentence. Now let's read the very first sentence of the 14th Amendment, which was the very amendment following the abolishment of slavery, which the 13th Amendment ratified December 6, 1865. Guess what? Just the next year. 14th Amendment ratified July 9th, 1868. So we go December 6, 1865, and they reassembled to make this amendment July 9th, 1868. All persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States and of the state wherein they reside, period. Now, is there anything more I have to say but what I had said before about the first sentence of all the other amendments identifying a human right? But it gets even more interesting than that. The term citizen, which you could ask many people, what is a citizen? We're not men on the street people doing some man on the street video for you. But take our word that a lot of people would not fully understand what that means as a word alone, let alone what the first sentence of the 14th Amendment means.
And let's get into this too, because like Rick was saying, the first 12 amendments, they're all focusing on protecting your human rights. And all of a sudden, now they're flipping the script, it seems.
It's very arbitrary, too.
Right.
This first sentence is so arbitrary.
Like, it's like the king of England saying, all these people need to abide by this. All persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States. That is a demand. You know what I'm saying?
It'd be a little bit different if they said in this amendment, all persons born on the soil of America are now fellow people of other people who have been here for a while, and like they are protected by the Constitution. Like if it said, talking about if you're born here on the soil,
you're American.
You're American and protected by the Constitution. That would be very different, and I don't think we'd be sitting here now talking about it.
Right.
But the way they phrase this is just so much different, and also it's an interesting thing. I'm not sure if I can pull it up quickly right now. I'll probably let him talk for a minute right after I go to pull this up. But the term citizen, so not only do not a lot of people know what it means as a word in general, even lesser know what it means in the terms of this amendment. And also, the funny thing I realized I think it was either yesterday or this morning, is that the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution prior, like all the articles setting up the government, they say the term citizen, but it's always capitalized. And I think it's said 19 times between the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution. Or maybe, I think it might just be the Constitution, but 19 times, 5 of which are in these sections of the 14th Amendment. So they're really emphasizing citizen, and it's the first time it is not capitalized.
Also want to point out too, we're also going to end up bringing this up in this episode too, is persons. What does that mean as well? So we're going to pull up Black's Law Dictionary and show you what truly it means to be a citizen or a person. And that'll dive into other conversations when we're talking about jurisdictions and how that all operates within the judicial system. But we'll get into a video with that later on as well. But as you can see, there's a difference now between the first 12 and then the rest of the amendments in the Constitution. And I wanted to just throw in an Easter egg real quick. We're not going to get too into it today, but these are the reasons. Well, this is the reason why there's such a significant difference between when they are explaining our human rights and the constitutional protections behind it versus their laws that they're laying upon us, basically. So there's the Constitution of the United States, and then there's the Constitution for the United States. The Constitution of the United States means of the United States citizens. For the United States means for the United States corporation. So they have to abide by that Constitution. It's just one word that they switched up. The Constitution of versus the Constitution for. There's a reason why there's such a significant difference when it comes to these amendments, splitting it off between the first 12 and the rest to 27.
And also, I'm just going to go through real quick and pass through every time it says citizen through the Constitution, and just keep an eye out how it's always capitalized up until where we were just reading. And then it also says it 5 times where... so that's another thing. The 14th Amendment it's the first amendment to have more than 2 sections. The only one prior was the 13th, where the second section just said that Congress can reinforce it or whatnot with laws. So like the second section in the 13th was just like a little sub note saying that Congress can act on this. Whereas the 14th, now you break down to like 5 sections, and it leads to a way of being that will show like how you can operate in your life to reclaim your human rights, that this amendment specifically, we'll get way into it, not all at once, or else it'd be a freaking 15-hour video. So just know we'll be back and vigilant about posting and keeping it all coordinated, because if we just start going off the top of our heads, you'll be sitting there with notepads scribbling it. What did he just say? What did he just say? What did he just say? So just understand we'll get to it all, but we just want to emphasize the importance of all this common commercial law, and then your Bill of Rights. That's literally protecting you as a person as you live. So I'm just going to scroll through real quick. I'll pass the mic off to him in case he has anything to mention about it. But I'll just scroll through slowly because there's like 21 at times. And then right at 14, it goes to undercase.
So if you didn't know, you're not a person in the way that you think the definition of a person is. Because when it comes to jurisdictions, they want you to believe that you're just a person, just a vessel here, and you're a citizen and not an American. So if you want to pull out the technicalities, we are humans with a soul, having a human experience, and we are not citizens. We're Americans. We were born here in America, so that makes us Americans. Citizens is a label that they put on you, so they have jurisdiction over you, and we'll get into that. As a person, they consider that a dead entity, and we'll also get into that. It's called straw man. That's a whole nother video, but we'll get into that.
And as I was going through, it seemed to pause. There's some type of holdup. But like it is always capitalized, and then the first time it happens to be the 14th. So I just found that very interesting and telling. And then we have here the Black's Law Dictionary definition of citizen. And I'm aware that there's multiple books that different, like the Senate pulls from this book, and the original founding fathers pulled from this one. Oh, and I guess it just loaded. But I understand there's multiple books, like dictionary thesauruses that different people have pulled from in government. Like the founding fathers dictionary is obviously different than the law book they're using now, Black's Law. But we have the definition of citizen right here.
Blow this thing up.
Then just up a little bit. So, a member of a free society, or city, or jural society, possessing all the rights and privileges which can be enjoyed by any person under its constitution and government, and subject to the corresponding duties. Citizens are members of community inspired to common goal, who, in associated relations, submit themselves to rules of conduct for the promotion of general welfare and conservation of individual as well as collective rights. And then, just like off to the right, I just found that interesting. A corporation is a citizen of state, under whose laws it is created. And a big part of this gets into the commercial world of commercial law. How they treat you as you walk into a courtroom as a citizen. These are all things we will cover extensively. So as we hit you with all this information, it's just kind of a primer as to see how you've gotten this big commercial law world that they're trying to soak you in, and pay for tabs, pay for fishing license, pay to sell goods, like a business license, alcohol, like you have to have a liquor permit, all this stuff. There's a bunch of people whose jobs is literally to check on the people who are giving and selling goods and doing stuff, whether it's for their own happiness or supporting a community, whether it's a bar serving drinks or a baseball game where you're serving drinks to people who enjoy that kind of thing, as do I. But you got a huge amount of people whose sole job it is to regulate that commerce and, in essence, strip, like, because that's like a basic economics where it's like you have to produce something to be productive and sell stuff. But what does the government do? How do they get their money if they're unproductive? Well, they got to make themselves busy somehow. And taxes and all this stuff, it gets deep. But we just wanted to kind of prime you guys for videos to come where we're going to dive right into just that. Because not only are we just talking about it and complaining, we got a whole plan that we're going through. I think one of the first steps I'm going to go about is getting a separate passport to reflect a status. And this is all stuff you'll hear. But so that's the first step in avoiding registration for your car and licensing fees.
Basically just going back to common law, super simple. So if you don't want the government honing over the top of your head about these statutes and codes as a United States citizen, because that's what they're going to do, that's all they want is your money, actually changing your status and becoming an American or a national, they don't have any jurisdiction over you. So those are the processes and steps that we're going to be taking along this journey so that we could separate ourselves from the commercial aspect and actually become free human beings and not having the government over our heads about taxes and like we'll get into all that as time moves on. But yeah, it's a huge thing that needs to be addressed.
But with that, all I was going to add to what he had said is that you have to know what you're talking about. There's a big portion of law, which we'll get into all this, so I feel bad even going off into it, but I guess it's just prep for one of our next videos, that they treat a lot of people as incompetent. You go in, whether you're suing or being sued, or you've committed a crime, whether it's real or fake, and you have the right to an attorney.
Oh, we got to get into that.
And we will. I just don't know if we have time tonight.
Right.
But that might be the next thing we get into, because just like we're talking about the right to travel versus a driving privilege, there's a right to an attorney, but it gets deep quick if you don't know what you're talking about and you don't know what they're doing. There's a lot of rules that you have to know off the top of your head, because I'm sure most places won't let you walk in and sit with a laptop or be on a video call with someone, because at the end of the day, in the end game of all this, you represent yourself. You're a living soul. You're not in their commercial world. Because this commercial talk we're talking about, the laws of commerce, also gets tied into court systems.
Right.
You might think that's strange, but it's commerce. The judge is getting paid. They're making money. This is commerce. It's just not a productive kind of commerce. But there is hope. There is hope.
Yes.
We're here. We aren't going to be stopped.
Wait, before we let you go, we'll make it real nice and simple. A citizen is servitude to your government. You're a slave to them unknowingly. Don't be a citizen. Be an American. And yes, this is the Torch of Liberty. We appreciate you guys tuning in today. Love, truth, peace to all of you, and have a wonderful evening.
We'll see you soon.
Guaranteed.